Okay, so good evening, everyone, and thank you for participating in our online information session about the new proposal for 435 Green Avenue West. And so I just want to acknowledge before we get started that tonight's meeting is taking place on the traditional and unceded territories of the Sidewalk Nation, and we extend our appreciation to the Sidewalk people for the opportunity to hold our meeting here today. And so your hosts for tonight are myself. I'm Joanne Clubb. I'm the Manager of Communications and Engagement for the City of Penticton. And with me is Stephen Collier, who is a member of our planning department and the lead planner on this file, and also our main presenter tonight. And so I just wanted to give you a bit of an overview of what the city's role is in this engagement process. We are not here as champions of applications, but really just facilitators to ensure that the residents who are potentially affected by this proposal are aware that it's happening, have the opportunity to learn about it and ask questions and share their feedback. And so we have our OCP engagement procedure, which outlines what activities we do to make sure that we have a standard approach for each of our applications to amend the OCP. And so our goals, again, make sure you're aware of the proposal and details, give you a chance to learn more, ask questions, and also gather your feedback that Stephen can then take back to council should the application move forward. And council is going to consider whether or not to allow the proposed amendments to the OCP. I see we have another participant tonight. Thanks for joining us. So how does tonight work? Yes, the session is recorded. As I mentioned, it's a great opportunity for us to publish the presentation for anyone who's missed this meeting. We will also accept your questions via the Q&A function. So if you have any questions, please enter in the Q&A. And then we'll be able to answer them in an orderly queue. And we do have interactive polls. It's more fun with more participation, but we'll probably still do those anyways, just so we get a sense of who's in the room and how people are feeling about this proposal. And again, just to reiterate, so the intent of the engagement is to really understand, make sure that staff understand all of the issues and concerns that the community has, and that we can convey that accurately to council to support their decision. And as you know, community feedback is one of several factors that council has to consider and must balance when they're making decisions on behalf of the community. So it's really important that people understand that you know, when you come and show your support or your opposition to a proposal, it's really council's decision on how to proceed with the best interests of the community. And I see that James has asked if we need a quorum for this meeting. So this is an information session. This is not an official meeting of council or the city. So no quorum is needed because no decisions will be made. It's simply information sharing. And with that, it's also about you sharing information. And so we do have interactive polls. So if you're by your screens, I'd like to do the first interactive poll. And that is, what brings you out tonight? What made you want to join in on the on tonight's presentation? So you have a few options. Do you live or own a property nearby? Do you own a business nearby? Are you a Penticton resident but do not live nearby? You're a business owner but your business is not nearby, or other, and you can describe that in the chat. And so far we're hearing from residents, but not, and one person who actually lives in near the proposed or the site of the proposed development. Okay, and I'm just going to share that with you. So you can see, so we have two citizens generally interested in the proposal and one who has a special interest by living in the area. Okay. And with that, I believe I get to turn it over to Stephen.
Alrighty, thanks, Joanne. And I'm glad for everybody who was able to turn up tonight. It's great to host these information sessions and provide this information to the public, both in person and through online sessions like these. So I'll explain the presentation from here. So first, we'll provide an overview of the planning process and how decisions on land use are made in Penticton. And then we'll go through some key information about the Green Avenue West proposal with a Q&A session at the end. Please again note that the session is being recorded, and that's to capture the discussion and questions that come forward. So we'll start off with a little planning 101, and this section of the presentation is to provide an overview of the land use planning process in Penticton and background about the city's official community plan. So the purpose of the official community plan is to provide a framework of goals and policies to guide decisions on planning and land use within Penticton. The OCP was adopted in 2019 and was created with substantial public involvement. The OCP is meant to guide the evolution of the city up to 2045. By then, we're expected to have about 42,000 people. The OCP establishes goals and policies to enable sustainable population growth in our community. The city is expected to see an average annual population growth rate of 0.65% until 2046. Now, that growth rate could vary with periods of higher growth and lower growth. Penticton is expected to experience net growth over the years, mostly due to migration into the community. The 2021 census shows that Penticton has been growing quickly over the last 5 years, with an average population growth rate of 1.86% per year between 2016 and 2021. The OCP anticipates an increase of about 250 people per year to achieve that population of about 42,000 by 2046. And that represents an increase of about 7,500 people and almost 4,500 new households over 2016 numbers. The highest proportion of housing in Penticton today is single-family homes, with 43% of all housing. The next largest segment is low-rise apartments up to 6 stories, followed by other multi-housing types such as townhouses, high-rises, apartments, and duplexes. The proportion of single-family homes has been decreasing as more multifamily units have been developed in recent years. This trend will continue into the future due to limited options for new single-detached neighborhoods in the city and an increased preference for living closer to the downtown and other amenities. Penticton had a population of about 37,000 people in 2021, according to the census. A growing population requires more housing units, especially since household size is decreasing, which is typical of an older and aging population. The proportion of 1- and 2-person households in Penticton is over 75%. In terms of the needs by housing type, the greatest future housing need will be for duplexes and infill housing, such as townhomes, with over 1,500 new units required in the city by 2046. There will, however, be a need for all types of housing across the housing spectrum, everything from single detached homes to apartments. However, the greatest need will be for infill housing and low-rise apartments, as shown on the graph on this slide. The official community plan outlines areas of the city that are expected to see growth. In the 2002 official community plan, many areas up in the hillsides were expected to be developed, as you see on the map to the left there. In the 2019 official community plan, most of these growth areas have been scaled back to the built-up area of town. This follows the city's current growth plan, which is to focus on infill housing developed in the built-up area of the city, close to shops, services, and amenities. Development in these areas promotes walkability and active transportation, while preserving more natural and agricultural lands from development pressure. The official community plan outlines a plan to manage population growth over the next 25 years. Much of our development will be accommodated through intensification of Penticton's existing urban areas, which maximizes the existing use of public infrastructure and creates complete and accessible communities while minimizing negative environmental impacts. There is an emphasis on low-rise and mid-rise developments rather than high-rise developments in our new OCP. 4 key goals of the growth management plan is to better use land in the urban area, maximize existing assets, create complete communities, and minimize negative impacts on natural areas. So the next section of the presentation here will focus on the development proposal we've received for 435 Green Avenue West. The property is 1.46 hectares in size and is located on the north side of Green Ave near the Channel Parkway. The property is located in a primarily residential neighborhood with building forms generally 1 to 2 stories in height. The subject property is approximately 200 meters west of the Peachtree Square Plaza on Skaha Lake Road, which contains a number of stores and services, including Walmart, Sport Chek, and Bulk Barn. To the west is the Okanagan Channel and the Channel Multi-Use Trail. There is a wetland located on provincially owned land between the subject property and the Channel Parkway. A fragment of the Oxbows exists on Crown land to the north of 435 Green Avenue. The property currently contains a single detached home, carriage house, and storage buildings. Now, the applicant is proposing to build an 84-unit strata townhouse development on the subject property. The proposal consists of 44 two-bedroom units and 43 bedroom units split into 10 buildings. 8 buildings around the perimeter of the development are 2 stories high, with 2 buildings in the center of the development being 3 stories high, with garages provided on the ground level. The plans show several shared amenity areas throughout the development and environmental restoration with substantial new plantings along the west and north property lines. 134 parking spaces are proposed in total, which exceeds the minimum 105 spaces required by the zoning bylaw. Landscaping will assist with buffering the development from residential properties to the south and to the east. These landscape buffers are required by the city zoning bylaw and will be secured through a landscaping deposit taken at the future building permit stage. You'll see that the development is set back further on the west side of the property, and that's to provide a riparian buffer from the wetland along the Channel Parkway. The proposed landscaping in the parking area far exceeds the minimum requirement in the zoning bylaw. This assists with breaking up the parking lot and improving stormwater infiltration. Three mature trees are proposed to be retained through this proposed development, with over 100 new trees and 700 new shrubs proposed. This slide shows some of the OCP future land use designations that apply to residential properties in Penticton. They're organized with the more rural designation on the left and increase in density as you move to the right. 435 Green Avenue is currently designated detached residential, which envisions single detached houses with an option for carriage house or secondary suites. The proposal would change the OCP designation to ground-oriented residential, which envisions more units per property in the form of duplexes, fourplexes, townhouses, or bareland strata developments, as long as each unit has its own exterior door. Some of you might remember in 2020, a different developer proposed an apartment project for the subject property, consisting of 130 units split between one 4-story building and one 6-story building. That application was seeking the urban residential OCP designation and the RM3 medium density multiple housing zone. After the public engagement process for that proposal, council ultimately voted to close and abandon the project. After hearing concerns from neighbors about height, density, parking, and traffic. The current townhouse proposal is from a different developer than the previous apartment proposal, and the current developer was able to review the comments raised through the previous engagement session last year when they were designing out the current proposal. So in order for them to go ahead with the proposed development, they need a number of different planning approvals. 3 of those shown in white are council approvals. So that's the official community plan amendment bylaw to change it to ground-oriented residential, the zoning amendment bylaw or rezoning to the RM2 low density multiple housing zone, as well as a development permit, which is the approval of the form and character and overall layout of the development on the site. The approval in gray, it is delegated to staff and the province for approval. That's the riparian and environmental development permit. This property is within a riparian area and an environmental assessment area noted by our OCP. So they require that before any construction occurs on site. Now, recognizing that the OCP is a living document, applications to amend it are expected from time to time. While the OCP guides land use decisions up to 2045, it's likely that over that time, there might be changing trends or unexpected events that require the city to consider amendments to the plan. Proposals to amend the OCP must respect the overall vision and values of the OCP, while also allowing for innovation and adaptation as new opportunities arise. They are considered by City Council, and that's based on alignment with the OCP vision and goals, providing demonstrable social, economic, and environmental benefits to the community, assessing the costs and other implications for infrastructure, making sure that the development is a suitable design for its context, and making sure that through this process, we provide meaningful public engagement so that people are aware of the proposal and have plenty of opportunities to provide their feedback before council consideration. The OCP envisions more density in this general area over the next 25 years, even though it's mostly single detached homes today. This is shown on the map on the slide here. So 435 Green Avenue West is highlighted in red and is currently designated detached residential in that light yellow color, which is the same designation as the neighborhood to the south of Green Ave. But you'll see on the north side of Green Ave, it's already designated ground-oriented residential, which envisions multifamily homes like townhomes and cluster housing, but with each unit having its own door to the outside, so not consistent with apartments. The proposed change on this property would be aligned with the ground-oriented residential designation, which already exists on the north side of Green Avenue. This form of development does support the nearby Peachtree Square Plaza, with providing more density within a short walk to the shops and services, as well as the transit exchange at the plaza there. One of the factors that we consider with the proposed development is if there's any works that are required from an infrastructure perspective. So some of you might be aware there is a missing sidewalk across this property. It's one of the gaps to connect over to the Channel Parkway. So this slide shows that through that, there is quite a tight spot there with the corner of the property at the southwest. So we are proposing to take a corner of the property, and that's to facilitate sidewalk construction across the whole frontage. In addition, the developer is responsible for any upgrades to sanitary, water, or any other services into the site in order to service their development. A couple other considerations, one of them is traffic. So before bringing the application package to council, staff did require the applicant to submit a traffic impact assessment report. That report was prepared by a qualified traffic engineer who concluded that the existing street network can accommodate the vehicle movements associated with the proposed development. The report recommends the developer construct street frontage improvements, which enable the future 3-lane cross-section of Green Avenue West, including a public sidewalk across the whole frontage of the property. Another important consideration is the environment. Staff did identify that the property is located in the Environmental Development Permit Area and Riparian Development Permit Area, both outlined by our OCP. The applicant has provided a report by a qualified environmental professional, and that professional has provided recommendations and requirements for them to follow through developing out the site. And one of those is restoration along the west side of the property, which is shown on the slide here. They do need to provide some additional plantings. Sorry, Joanne, if you could just jump ahead a couple slides there. Yeah, they do have to provide a couple extra plantings and restoration along that side to improve the riparian habitat along that western wetland there. That'll be one of the things that through the environmental development permit, staff can ensure happens in accordance with the professionals' requirements there. Community engagement is required when amendments to the official community plan are proposed. In this case, the applicant is proposing to change the future land use designation of this property from detached residential to ground-oriented residential to facilitate their proposed townhouse development. The results of the engagement period will be shared with City Council, the applicant, and the community after the end of the period. Staff are following the procedure for community engagement for OCP amendments. It involves many steps to raise awareness and give the public opportunities to learn about the proposal and provide their feedback. Shape Your City Penticton is the main hub for information for the project, and that's where you can fill out a feedback form to share your views. A notice sign was posted on the property and letters were mailed to residents within 100 meters. Stakeholder groups, including Friends of the Oxbows, School District 67, and the Penticton Indian Band, have been contacted for consultation. In addition, news releases and newspaper ads were sent out to raise community awareness about the proposal. And I'll turn it back over to Joanne. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Stephen, and apologies if we skipped over a couple of those slides. We can certainly go back and show you those graphics if you have questions about them, but we will get started on the Q&A session. Because it is a small group, if you would like to address the group and staff directly, just raise your hand and I will certainly open up the mic so that you can ask your question. We do have a question from James that I'll put to Stephen, and we'll get our conversation started. So you can either enter your question in the chat in the Q&A section, or else you can raise your hand and we'll open up the mic for you to address Stephen directly. So thanks everyone. Also, you'll see on the slide there is an option of if you prefer not to ask your question publicly, you can get a hold of Stephen directly. So let's go ahead and look at James's question, Stephen. So James is curious about he's asking that the conceptual drawings are showing that the units are level entry access, which meets the building code. Will there be an option for a lift to access the upper levels of each unit?
Yeah, based on the plans that were submitted, we don't see an option for a lift for upper level access. It's certainly a comment we can put forward to the developer, seeing if that's something they were looking at providing or not. The city does have a number of guidelines that encourage level access into ground-oriented units. So it's good to see that some of those units are flat enough to provide that, but we don't have anything that speaks to the inside. So it's a good question, James. We can put that over to the developer, and they might speak to that at the future public hearing if they're planning to do anything with the lift to provide that upper floor access.
Thank you for that. And so we've got one more question in the queue, and then I see we have a couple of hands raised. So Lori's curious about 1-bedroom units.
Yeah, Lori, no 1-bedroom units provided in this proposal, just 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom.
And just on that note, though, we have a number of developments that are being considered at this time. So is it fair to say that some of the other ones might provide 1-bedroom options?
Yeah, typically we see 1-bedroom units in apartment forms more so than the townhouse types. So we do have a number of proposals either under construction or in the approvals queue right now, which do provide 1-bedroom unit options, just not within this development.
Okay. And Chris has sent us a message, and I think you meant to share it with everyone, Chris. And so I'm just going to go ahead and read your question, and then we'll return to our queue. And so Chris is asking, do you see it, Stephen? Was the intersection at Paris and Green taken into account in the traffic study?
Yeah, so the traffic consultant did review that intersection. They looked at the whole section of Green Ave from the Channel Parkway all the way to Skaha Lake Road and all the intersections in between. They did find the Paris one, and I know I heard from a few people at the open house last week. There's quite a few concerns there with how long it can take to turn left off of Paris, either going north or south on that street. It was reviewed by the traffic consultant. They determined, it doesn't operate that great, but it's not at a level where there's any requirements needed to upgrade it, at least based on their assessment. It's something that the city's flagged and we'll definitely look at moving forward because that's more an existing issue than directly related to this development. At least based on some of the comments I've heard, some people have said that already there's quite a problem there from their perspective. So good to have that noted through the engagement period, and it's something that as we look at that whole section of Green Ave in the future, we can hopefully address in some way.
Great. Okay, we'll go back to the queue. And so Lori's asking a question about bike storage. She's suggesting it's not very well addressed, cash instead and only racks. So not safe. Can you provide a little context to that, Stephen?
Yeah, so our zoning bylaw has a bike parking requirement. So for residential developments, there's a certain number of dedicated bike parking spaces that have to be provided. Now, if it's a type of development that provides garages in the units, we can count the garage as the secure bike parking storage. But in this case, there's about 60 some odd units that won't have garages. The plans submitted right now don't show secure bike storage. It's something that came up at the council meeting as well, something that council was interested in just understanding a bit more why that decision was made by the developer. It's something that we've shared with them. We put that comment or concern maybe off to them to see if we can bring in a solution to provide some secure bike storage. Again, because it is in line with our OCP goals of promoting, walkability and active transportation. So we do have the ability at this time to have the developer update their plans if they choose to do so. And I think that's something that we're just interested in knowing more about why they chose to not provide it and provide that cash in lieu option instead.
Yeah, great feedback, Lori. Thanks for that. And so A Angle has a question. They're suggesting that the property is close to the highway, which will increase traffic. There will be complaints about noise and air pollution from the road affecting the homes. And how will the city deal with that?
Yeah, and fair question. It is quite close to the highway there. Going to the assessment side of things, we did require the traffic impact assessment, and the Ministry of Transportation controls the Channel Parkway. So they looked at this development in terms of where the driveways are and if that provided an issue for that intersection there. They haven't come back with any concerns that way. And in terms of noise pollution and air pollution, these homes are quite set back actually from the Channel Parkway. There's quite a few homes further south, on the south side of Green Ave West. They're backing right up onto the highway, and quite a few further north along the channel as well. So these sort of benefit, I guess, from a natural buffer with that wetland. So they are about 20 meters or so, which works out to about 60 some odd feet, from the property line. And then the townhomes are set further back than that. So with the trees in between and the physical space, it does help limit the impact of the parkway slightly.
Great, thank you for that. Lori, your comment is a statement, not a question. So I think Lori's question is has the city considered the crossing for pedestrians to get to the channel from the new sidewalk? Will it be dangerous?
Yeah, the sidewalk across the frontage of the property is sort of filling a missing gap. We aim to have a sidewalk on at least one side of every street, at least the major ones anyway. And Green Ave is pretty major in my mind. So that would be a benefit that way. The channel walking trail is quite popular, and Green Ave is one of the few places where you can cross over the river channel and actually get to it. So improving that connection and walkability is considered a good result through this development. Now, I heard from some people at the engagement last week that the crosswalk across the parkway is actually on the south side of the road, whereas this development's on the north side. So it does mean for maybe a little extra walking there with the walk down to the other side of the parkway to get over. It is something that we have some ability to push for, but again, with it being the Ministry of Transportation that controls that highway, any changes ultimately have to be approved by them. It's something we could put off to them as an idea now that we have that direct sidewalk connection. But there is the pedestrian crossing there now, although I did hear from quite a few people that maybe it doesn't give you quite enough time to get across unless you have long legs like I do.
Yes, Stephen walks very fast. Okay, so A Angle would like to know if we've consulted with the Friends of the Oxbows.
They were one of the stakeholder groups that we identified for this development. I did reach out to them. I haven't heard anything back yet, but we still have a couple of weeks left on engagement, so I do hope to get a response from them. I know they provided a response last time, but we wanted to reach out again and just make sure, are your comments the same? Are there any changes now that the development proposal has changed? I think it's good to get that feedback and hear from them if they have anything else that they wanted to add on this, but we haven't heard anything back from them quite yet.
And then just in terms of the Oxbows and the protection provided, do you want to just expand on that a little bit? I know you did mention it a bit in the presentation.
Yeah, so there's a couple sections of Oxbow right around this property. On the north side, it's sort of a severed off section of the Oxbow. There's a townhouse development off Brandon that cut off the water connection from the north. And then actually on this property, there's a bit of fill that cut it off from the wetland on the west side. So that part is quite dry. It looks pretty foresty just from looking at it from the side, rather than looking like a river channel. And then there's the wetland that's actually filled with water and connected to the river channel along the west side of the property line. Now, neither of those features are actually on 435 Green. They are on neighboring properties that are owned by the province because they're water bodies, or in the case of the northern one, it was a water body before it got kind of filled in and cut off. But they are environmental features that are important to protect. So from the west side, there are riparian setbacks, which are province driven and quite a bit greater than our normal zoning setbacks from property lines. And from the north, while they didn't have to because they haven't considered it as a stream, they have provided increased buffering from the north side and additional setbacks. You'll see there isn't really a building too close to the north side of the property there. It's some parking and then some new vegetation being proposed. So that helps provide a bit of a buffer from that section as well.
Thank you, Stephen. Okay, and so Lori's got a comment about not agreeing with the level of bike storage. So as you mentioned, that feedback's been provided and we'll see if anything comes from that. And and so Lori's also asking about accommodation for EV charging. Is there some?
Yeah, I was looking through the file just before this presentation actually, and I didn't see any references to electric vehicle charging. It's not to say that it hasn't been thought of, it's just that it hasn't shown on the plans at this time. So like the bike parking, we can provide that feedback to the developer, see what their plans are that way, whether they were planning to service any parking spaces for EV or have it ready to go for EV if people chose to do that in the future. I think it's definitely an important question to ask. So if we're not clear on it, we can go back to the developer and see what their plans are regarding EV charging.
Great, thanks for that. And so I do see that we do have a couple of our participants who'd like to address the group. And so Lori, I believe you had put your hand up first. If you'd still like to address the group, I'm going to turn on your microphone. So you should be able to. There you are. Go ahead, Lori.
Hi, thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I looked through the plans and they are way better than the ones that were proposed last year because they are less dense, but they are still too dense as far as I think for our area. They're I don't see the garages and I've looked and looked. I know there are some there, but I don't see them. I just see lots and lots of parking stalls and lots of like guest parking stalls, but still, I'm not sure where the visitors will park when they come to a party or something like that when there's no real parking nearby. So that's a first thing. The second thing is a couple of those buildings could come out. There's no community garden, there's no play area for children. If these are 2 and 3 bedroom units, perhaps they're thinking that children might actually live there, but there's nowhere for them to play. And there's no accommodation for any kind of community gathering. So it's really just warehousing again, which is, maybe that's what the city wants, but I think that we can do better when it comes to developments like this, that we can actually consider livability because it is walkable to go shopping there, but with these bike racks, the way bikes are stolen in this city, this is a worry, and there's no place for people to congregate. So it's not really a community. And that is one of the OCP things, is to create community. This isn't a community, it's just a bunch of places to sleep or to rent out. The other thing is they mentioned something called a Malloc waste management system. And that's a new type of a system where the unit is buried in the ground and can hold a whole bunch of trash, and then it's picked up and taken to the landfill or dumped into a truck. But it requires a special truck to lift it out of the ground. So they're planning this garbage system that I don't think we have those types of trucks available or in our city at this time. Is that correct, Stephen?
Yeah, good question, Lori. We do have a couple recent developments that provide Moloch bins as their garbage and recycling solution. With the case of multifamily developments, it's up to the strata to find a private contractor for garbage collection, but the city does recycle. And we did circulate this proposal through to our public works team, and they raised no concerns about servicing the Molochs. So we are seeing them a bit more and more with our recent developments. One example is the apartments on South Main Street, the new ones by Skaha Park. Those ones are serviced by Molochs too.
So there are trucks that actually can lift this thing out of the ground and dump it into a truck and take it to the landfill.
Yep, they can be serviced. Yeah.
And the recycling just goes into one big recycling bin and it gets separated somewhere else.
That detail, I don't know. I don't know for sure.
Okay, thank you. I have another question about climate issues, which would be permeable roads. instead of just blacktop. Look at all the blacktop. That's a lot of hard surface. That's a lot of heat. And I know they're planting more trees, but if you take a look at that plan, it's asphalt roofs with no solar panels on them, and a lot of asphalt on the ground, which is heat generating and water, useless water stuff. And I think that's it. Somebody else mentioned elevators, and I was concerned about that too, because it doesn't really make it easy for seniors to be in there. They need a place to put their mobility scooter perhaps, and they can't get upstairs easily. So I'm worried that this is another development for people who are not like Penticton residents, but people who will be coming here or who will invest and not live here, which then deteriorates the community further because there's a lot of empty homes. And I think that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Lori. And I've got a nice big long list of notes from your comments and others that we can capture. Did you have anything else you wanted to say on that, Stephen?
One of the things that Lori had brought up was the common amenity space and shared spaces in the development. You can see on this slide here, they are proposing a couple. I think it's definitely fair to argue whether what they're providing is enough or if there could be more. And I know one of the comments, I spoke with Lori last week, they could always look at removing a building and providing more common space. But they do have one near the center of the development and then one at the top right corner and the top left corner. So those could be used for a number of different uses. I know the back left corner there, they were planning to make use of some existing pavement, maybe look at some sort of sports court or hard surfaced area that's existing that could be repurposed for some shared amenity. So they are providing some on site. I think it's definitely fair to say, are they providing enough? I mean, based on our zoning bylaw requirements, they're providing more than the minimum requirement, but it's fair to say, should they provide more for the number of units that is being provided, even if it's meeting our city zoning bylaw. So I just wanted to raise that those have been provided on the plans, even though it perhaps might not be considered enough.
Great, thanks for that. Okay, and so I'm going to answer one question here and then we'll turn it over to James to address the group. So A. Engel's asking about whether or not a geotechnical assessment was done and if the soil is stable enough with the high groundwater over there, and how has climate change been factored into this development?
Yeah, and very key consideration for this development with the high water table all around this property. It's something that was flagged with the developer when they first approached the city with ideas of developing the property. We suggested this might be something you need to look into. It's not something that for an OCP change or a zoning change we're requiring, but we have noted that they've designed without basements and sort of a slab on grade style, which is a bit less demanding on geotechnical layout underneath the buildings. So we don't have a copy of the geotechnical study, but it would definitely be a requirement of the future building permit stage and something that we've encouraged them to investigate early on in their process.
Thank you, Stephen. Okay, James, your microphone is live. Go ahead and address staff.
Excuse me. Yes, I would echo the comments that Lori made about the disabled and seniors not being able to get to the upper levels of this development. I'm becoming a senior myself, and there are many young people living in the city that are disabled as well. They have mobility challenges. There may be some living in the community that are either paraplegic or quadriplegic. And my biggest concern is with these new developments such as this coming forward, there may be a shortage of wheelchair mobility barrier-free accessible living spaces for them. So what's being done to address these concerns that we're having?
Yeah, thanks for your question, James. I referred to this maybe briefly in my response earlier, but the city does have some guidelines that encourage universal design. So that means access to buildings without impediments like stairs or other design features so that everyone can access the exterior entrance easily. At this time, we don't have anything that requires the inside of residential units to be accessible to a certain standard beyond the building code requirements, which govern things like accessible washrooms, that sort of thing. It's something that we could look at, and I think it's an important feedback to gather, something that would probably apply more generally than to this specific project. But thank you for sharing your comments and those concerns at a general level.
Yes, yes, fair enough, because with me with Parkinson's disease, I need a barrier-free living space so that I'm not struggling with trying to walk up and down stairs, or if I'm in a wheelchair, I can't reach a stove because the dials are too far back against the wall to cook, as an example.
Yeah, and we also have the age-friendly action plan that provides guidance around developments that are accessible and allow people to age in place. And so I'll just be curious how we reconcile some of these great plans we have, like the climate action plan and all that, with a lot of the developments that are coming forward. So.
Well, it's not to say that this isn't a great development proposal. It is. It's just I wish these developers had come to the city with their plans and take into account people with disabilities that may want to own or rent their facilities in the future. That's the biggest comment I'd like to make tonight.
Perfect. Okay,
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, James. Okay, and so Lori's got a couple of more questions, or one more question and one more statement, and then I think we'll probably wrap things up, folks. So do you have any comment on how heat and cooling is being provided in this development, Stephen?
Yeah, we don't have those details at this stage. The application is really focused on the proposed land use and what people think of that before getting into the detailed design that is normally addressed at the building permit stage. If we had a policy or requirement for that, it's something we could require, but otherwise it's a feedback and a comment that we can put off to the developer to consider when they go ahead with the project, how they're planning to heat the building and their different HVAC options. But it's not something that we know the answer to at this land use decision stage.
Okay. Great. And this may not be a fair question for you, Stephen, but I'm just curious, like I know that Penticton has been fairly progressive in adopting the STEP code. And so will there be any more progressive requirements around green building with this development as a result of that commitment?
Yeah, I'll try my best to answer that question. I believe right now we're at step code 3, and we've been kind of progressing up the ladder. And for those who maybe don't know what step code is, it is a building code, a BC building code level, and it basically requires a certain standard of environmentally friendly construction. I don't know all the details of exactly what step code 3 is versus step code 2. I'm not a building official, but I know that we are making progress that route, recognizing that buildings and how they're heated and cooled, especially, and how they're constructed in the first place, definitely has a lot of impacts on the environment and greenhouse gases. So it's important as we go forward with new development to try and make it as environmentally friendly as possible. So I'm not even sure how many levels there are to step code, but I know that we are progressing up the ladder, if you will, with that over time. We do also have a sustainable building technologist on staff, and that's been a great resource as well for the city to bring in some of these new techniques and methods for construction that are more environmentally friendly than before.
Great, thanks for that, Stephen. And then I just left Lori's comment on there. I think it's an important one for the city and staff to remember that we do have a lot of great plans in place, but you know, it's with these developments where there's an opportunity to really make a difference. And so I think it's a great comment there, and it's certainly something we can include in the feedback, and something that we need to think about as a city too, on how we you know, ensure that we're fulfilling the commitments that we're making in these plans. Okay, and then, okay, Lori, thanks for your comment. So my last slide here is just to remind you that engagement on this project is open until June 5th. And so you can either complete the form online at Shape Your City. We also have paper copies here at City Hall. And also, Stephen and I have both taken notes from tonight and from the open house. So definitely your comments made tonight are probably pretty consistent with what we're hearing elsewhere. And so we'll definitely, as Stephen mentioned, relay that back to the applicant and also to staff and council. So thank you very much, everyone, for your participation. And with that, I'll give you back your evenings. Have a great night.
Thanks, guys. It was really great.
Good. Thanks, Lori.
Thanks for attending.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
I'm going to stop recording now, Stephen.